One. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us at our Entering China series on M&A and FDI today. So today we actually have Asia Practice with us. So before we begin the webinar proper, let me go through some administrative details. So this webinar will actually be recorded and uploaded onto SGTech's YouTube channel as well as on our website. So on our website, we do have post-event articles where we compile all the key takeaways from various webinars. So if you haven't checked that out, you can always go to our website to have a look. And for this session, we will be conducting a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if you have questions for the panelists or on China in general, you can always post them on the Q&A box, and we will have the panelists answer the questions at the end of the webinar. Yeah, okay, so today we will have Asia Practice. They are actually a law firm that is specialized on consulting, and also they are actually a full service corporate firm that supports banks and financial institutes as well as corporates, advising on the various types of corporate and financing structures, from structuring to the enforcement, from mergers and M&As to loan facilities and securitization, including trade, commodities, project, real estate, and financing. So Xue Kun, she's a senior associate at China Practice with experience in China law. So besides working with numerous local and overseas banks, she has also helped to facilitate startup investments and pre-litigation work. Connor, he's a legal executive at Asia Practice with a specialization in maritime law. He has experience in cross-border business and financial laws. So let's welcome Connor, please. Connor, remember to unmute yourself.
Hi everyone. First of all, thank you for attending our seminars. And so today we're talking about legal gateways investing in China. So before we started, let me just have a small introduction of our law firms. So we are a corporate and finance focused Singapore-based law firm. We have been constantly working with Chinese companies, law firms, and service providers.
Connor, you will need to change the display setting to show the full slideshow, because right now we are seeing the notes.
Okay.
The presenter's view.
Yes, okay. So we have been constantly working with Chinese companies, law firms, and service providers for over a decade. And we have formed a very good, long relationship with different law firms and service providers all over in different cities in China. And meanwhile, we have set up our Asia Practice networks. So basically, we will have our partner law firms in every ASEAN countries. So if you have any questions in relation to China, in relation to investing in China or investing in ASEAN countries, you're highly welcome to talk to us, and we will help you to find your solutions and to find your to structure your investment in different areas. So let's talk about our today's topics. So basically, we'll go through, I will share some thoughts on market trends in China, business perspectives, and preliminary considerations when you decide to invest in China. And then my colleague Xue Kun will share more on appropriate legal structures. And so first, let's talk about the business perspectives that fit into general market trends of the M&A scenes in China. So according to the latest investment report, the China ranks as the second host economics for foreign direct investment inflows. FDI inflows to China has been constantly increasing for the past 2 years, but due to the impact of COVID-19, there are some declines over the period of January to March. but there has been an upward trend since March because China has been contained the virus very well and gradually recover from this pandemic. And so during the latest meetings convened by the CCP, the central government, the China has brought up a development pattern that is focused on its internal circulation, and with the internal circulation and international circulations to interact together, but which means that China is now more focused on the internal domestic market to boost its domestic demands to recover from the pandemic as soon as possible. So, but this doesn't mean that China has closed its door for the foreign investment. Actually, China has released several new policies and new programs. Today we'll talk about this new infrastructure programs, which is, I think, is more suitable and more, you will find more opportunities through this new programs, especially for the members of our SGTechs. Okay, right now, this new infrastructure programs is the top priority of the China Future Development Plan. So the new infrastructure program actually refers to 新基础建设, or for short we call 新基建, which is mainly focused on technology industries and sectors, including 5G technologies, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and smart nations and smart cities. And as a part of this program is be treated as part of the COVID-19 relief package, which means the program is for building new infrastructures and new technologies across the whole country, not necessarily, not only for one certain areas. And since this program is more focused on technology industries and subsectors, I think for foreign investment, foreign technology companies, you will find more opportunities through this program. And unlike other infrastructure programs that China has been brought up during the financial crisis in 2008, and these programs, Chinese government is more rely on private investment, looking for more cooperation between government and private companies and foreign investors. And so what is exactly the new infrastructure means? So broadly speaking, it refers to, it's divided into three categories. The first one is innovative infrastructures. Basically is the R&D institutions, research infrastructures, and innovation-focused industrial parks. The second part, the information infrastructures, refers to new technologies, or basically the 5 to 7 key areas, including 5G, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and ultra high voltage transmissions. And the third one is the integrated infrastructures, which are application of internet, big data, other technologies to support the transformation and upgradation of traditional infrastructures in order to build the smart cities across China. And so, as I mentioned earlier, unlike the traditional infrastructure program, this program encouraging private investment and encouraging foreign investors to invest in to help the program to develop. And so in each different subsectors and industries, they will have different government investment ratio. So I do recommend, if you are considering to take part in this program, you before you enter into China, you should assess your business, the industries or the subsectors your business belongs to, what is the government investment ratios, if, let's say, for example, if your business is involving in satellite communications or ultra high voltage power transmissions, they'll have a very high government investment ratios. So you may have to consider whether we want to ally with a government or state-owned enterprises to form a partnership. Comparatively, if you're doing business like smart robots, 3D printing, or application development, you have more freedom, because in this area they will have less government investment ratios. Is quite foreign investment friendly.
As Connor is trying to get the slides up properly, my name is Leon. Maybe we can do a summary of what Connor just said just now. Especially members of SGTech, if any of you are thinking of going into China at the moment, now could not be a better time. If you look at the 5-year prior to the present, the ODI numbers in China have been rising, meaning Chinese outbound investments have been rising, and the foreign direct investments into China have been decreasing. So this actually signals a change in China's economy from being the manufacturing or the world's factory. They have now actually become one of the largest consumer economies at the moment. So this trend has been continuing, which then also explains what Connor said. The new FDI rules for investors coming in to China have been relaxed. In a lot of instances now, you have equal standing to local corporates. You can compete on equal footing. The rules have been relaxed so much that unless you are in a restricted area of industry, a single person, foreigner, who does not reside in China can actually go and set up his own Chinese corporate entity. Yeah, and also, given what has been happening between the US and China in relation to the trade wars, and then now in relation to the mudslinging concerning COVID-19 and so on and so forth, you realize that China is looking internally. They realize that their internal domestic market is huge enough. And if you look at the last quarter GDP numbers in China, the recovery has been quite amazing. And it is also a signal to foreigners outside China to actually look seriously at investing part of their business into China, simply because of the market access that it will afford you. So that's a summary of why this is the best time if you are looking at going into China. And as Connor mentioned, there are some industries where there is a restriction in relation to the amount of shares that you can hold, who can hold a controlling stake in a particular industry or in a particular segment of industry. When thinking of going into China, no one business at this present day and time concentrates on only one item. Your business, especially if you're in tech, can cover a whole gamut of applications. So you might need to consider which portions of your business you want to put into China as your own private enterprise, and which portion of your business which is restricted you will need to go and share with a local partner as mandated by Chinese law. So don't just go in wholesale with your entire business and all the various business branches or things that you are doing directly into China. Think about how you can segment, ring fence, and safeguard certain parts of your businesses which don't need to be put into a JV with a state-owned enterprise. Okay, Connor.
Connor.
Hi,
Would
sorry.
you like to unmute? Yeah.
Trying to get
So
my,
I can help you share the screen. Yeah. So maybe you can just prompt me.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, sorry, guys, I have encountered some technology issues. Okay, so ultimately, the openness to foreign investment will depend on whether the sector is mentioned in the negative list or encouraged list. So based on this list, foreign investment in the internet data centers or 5G networks may force the most stringent restrictions, while investment in the industrial internet, AI, and are generally perceived to be the most foreign investment friendly. And recently, China also released its exposure draft for the so-called encouraged list. So which further encourages foreign invested enterprises to participate in the high-tech development of this new program. As we can see, a lot of subsectors and industries have been put on the encouraged list and being removed from the negative list. So so this draft is currently undergoing its final round of public consultation. So if the encouragement list has been implemented, it will further open up a range of high-tech sectors to foreign investors. So I think this will be a very exciting news for the companies in the sectors. And foreign invested enterprises who invested in this encouraged industry lists will be subject to tariff exemptions, preferential land prices, loose regulations of land use, and several tax reliefs on the company income taxes. But the industries appear on the negative list still remain either be restricted or prohibited from foreign investment entry. Yeah, and we can go to the next slides. Yes, so the other part is China is a very big country. We have different provinces and cities. So before you go into China, I do recommend that you consider to find your own cities, to which city to choose, which city to go, and choose which city as your go-to cities, because each city have their different pivot or policies to different technology sectors or industries. For example, I have listed like 4 areas which are Shanghai, Hangzhou, Hainan, and the Greater Bay Area. So Shanghai is known as is famous. Shanghai is known as the financial center of China. So there are more foreign investment. They are more foreign investment friendly, especially when it comes to the financing policies. But actually, Shanghai is also known as a bit fall behind during the internet revolutions in China. It does not have a very strong internet genes or environment, but Shanghai has found its own way to encourage the new projects and high technology companies in relation to this new infrastructure programs. It has formed its own technology parks and incubators in Zhangjiang and also in Caohejing High Tech Park. So it has more policies to encourage companies in relation to this environment, technologies, fintech, high-tech R&Ds and medtechs to come to Shanghai. For example, the famous the famous company Tesla has located its factory in China, and the manufacturer has started for quite a long period. And if your companies you are doing business in this few areas, especially if you have a strong connection with this new infrastructure programs, I do highly recommend that you choose Shanghai as your go-to city. And then the next city is Hangzhou. Hangzhou is known as the home to the technology giant Alibaba. It has a very strong presence of Alibaba, and the companies in the cities are strongly affected by Alibaba. Alibaba is known as a very big e-commerce companies. So the infrastructures for e-commerce business And recently, the very popular live streaming sales are well complete in these cities. In this city, you can find all the talents, practitioners, service providers, or even service providers for the e-commerce. So if your business, you want to explore more on the e-commerce side, Hangzhou will be the best city in China for you to think about. And then the next city is, it's not city, actually the next one is Hainan. So on June 1st, 2020, this year, Chinese authorities has released an overall plan for construction of Hainan Free Trade Port. So the Hainan will transfer entirely into a free trade port. But okay, actually this is not very special because China has formed a lot of special economic zones in recent years. But if you are doing a business in telecom, in internet communication services, you should really look at Hainan, because for these two industries, it's still on the negative list. So if you're trying to extend this part of business into China, in other provinces of China, it is either prohibited or restricted. But in Hainan Free Trade Port, China has lifted certain restrictions or even removed certain restrictions on these industries in relation to telecom or internet communication services. So if you are doing this business, Hainan might be the only provinces or only city you can think about. You can choose it as your go-to city because you will face the least restrictions in the whole country here. And the last one is the so-called the Greater Bay Area, including Guangzhou and Shenzhen. So these two cities are quite known as entrepreneur spirits. There are more startups and a lot of unicorns in different industries. And especially with the big companies like NetEase, Huawei, Tencent, and several unicorns located in that area, is more SME friendly and is more internet oriented. So if you are doing business like in relation to mobile internet or mobile networks, something like mobile games or what, you can really consider these cities. And these two cities are constantly being chosen for pilot programs such as 5G pilot programs, blockchain pilot programs, and recently the e-money pilot programs. So if you're doing some business in relation to blockchain technologies or the digital payment services technologies, so you can think about these two cities as your go-to cities.
1 second, Connor, give me 1 second. The slides which Connor has shown to all of you, these are different major cities in China trying to promote different segments of industry that they're trying to help out in. And in pursuit of this, they would have set up certain economic zones. They would have set up certain areas in which they will invite foreign investors to come in and to set up shop. They have KPIs to meet. So what it means is that what they can offer you in terms of tax breaks, what we have seen is that sometimes they have even offered you free offices for the use of the first 3 years, tax rebates and so on. But the most important thing to notice and to realize really is if it is a successfully developed economic zone, what the benefits are for you is that you will very often, more often than not, find complementary businesses that will be there that you can work together with, whether in partnership or as business partners, to further enhance your offering and your penetration into the local market. And the policies for each of these small zones changes constantly. And within a city like Shenzhen, for example, or Shanghai, there will be towns that have different policies that will try to attract you into their towns. And there are many towns all over the first tier and the second tier cities which are successful and many which are not. So before you actually think about going in to China, think about do a bit of field research to understand what sort of policies are being provided for by these towns and these cities, and whether it matches with you. Find out also who has already entered into that town or their economic zone, to see whether or not there are businesses that you want to meet or you think would be useful for you to meet to work together. And so different towns have different approvals as well. So for example, Connor mentioned Hainan, which has relaxed the telecommunications industry there. Shenzhen has relaxed the blockchain industry. Elsewhere, you won't be able to claim you're a blockchain company because you will not likely get the permit to set up a company like that. So speak to us or speak to somebody, SGTech as well, to find out, where is your particular interest, what are the industries you are entering into, and where is probably some of the cities you should consider and who you should meet. Thanks, Connor.
Okay, let's talk about the preliminary considerations before you enter into China. In this segment, we'll just talk about three key areas. One is tax, the other one is IP, obviously, for the technology companies, and then the negative list for foreign investors. And for the tax part, in the interest of time, we're not going to go into details on compare the tax segment between China and Singapore. And just one tip that is we think is very important for everyone who are intend to invest in China. As I mentioned earlier, China is really a quite big country, and every provinces have its own tax policies or tax incentives or reliefs. Even in the different district of the one city, let's say Shanghai got several districts. Each district can give its own tax reliefs or tax incentives. So before you enter into China, after you find your go-to city in which you have decided which city to go, do talk to us or find the service providers or tax advisors to have the overview of tax reliefs and tax incentives from different cities or even different districts of that cities. And next, for the intellectual properties, IP part. And recently, China has released its new trademark law. So the protective IP registration is not available in China. So you can think about register your intellectual properties rights with different authorities in China before you enter into the Chinese market to protect your IPs. And there won't be any forced transfer of technology license from foreign companies to Chinese parties. And but before you register your IPs, I think you do need to consider whether your product has value to register as the technology is keep changing, and especially in certain areas like blockchains or e-monies and mobile internet, 5Gs even. The technology is changing very fast, and you do please do consider whether your products has a value to complete the IP registration, because IP registration may take a certain period of time. And then after the registration, if the technology has already changing and your technology has no longer has the certain value to be protected, it may cost you extra time and extra cost in doing so. And the next, which is the most important part, the negative list for foreign investment. So the negative list for foreign investment refers to a list of prohibited or restricted industries for foreign investment. There were three types of industries. One is prohibited industries, which means the foreign investors are not allowed to set foot in. And then will be the restricted industries, which means foreign investors must meet special conditions to set foot in this industry. Most commonly seen as the shareholding ratio. The foreign investors cannot hold more than 50% of the shares of companies in certain industries. And then if your industry is not on the negative list, that means you are free to go. You can invest in, you can extend your business in whatever ways you want. But even though there is such an active list, because the Chinese market is very complicated. So before you enter into China, you can review your business model and think about how to structure your business. Even if your business is falls under this prohibited industries, is still not the end of the day. Actually, you can consider how to restructure your business. For example, if you are doing the electronic media business, and which this whole industry falls under the prohibited list, and it doesn't mean that, okay, I can't do business in China. You can restructure your business to remove the certain part that falls under the prohibited list. Let's say if you're doing the electronic media, so you can remove this part of producing the media, the content away from your structure, and you can provide like the electronic media support, the technology support is still available in China. So you can extend this part of the business into China. So before entering into China, do look at your business model and see which part can be removed or it's more flexible, and you can to adjust, and then check, go through its negative list and think about how you can reframe your business structures. And also, you're highly welcome to talk to us. We can help you to find a more appropriate approach to extend your business into China. And then we'll talk about this new foreign investment law in China. And this law is recently has been released last year, but coming into force in this year. So like what Leon just mentioned earlier, I think right now, even though we are in the very hard time due to the pandemic, due to the trade war, but I think we still have confidence of the promising futures of investing in China because of this new foreign investment laws. And there were two key points in this laws. One is the investment promotions. The other one is the investment protections. So in the investment promotion part, now the foreign investment companies, foreign invested companies can conduct more business in China, can compare with local companies in the government procurement through fairly competition, and the various policies to support the development of companies will also be equally applied to foreign invested companies. And also foreign invested companies can conducting financing through public offering of shares, corporate bonds, and other securities by other means. And it's all become possible for foreign invested companies. And then when we come to investment protections, now the government has legal obligations to keep their commitment to foreign investing companies, cannot increase the cost of foreign invested companies, and cannot illegally set any market access or withdrawal conditions, or illegally intervene or affect any normal productions or operations activities of foreign invested companies. And so the market is gradually open to the foreign companies, and in the futures, in the next few years, depends on the regulations and laws. They are prepared to release or lift the restrictions of capitals outflow or inflows for the foreign invested companies, which means in the near future, the foreign invested companies can even transfer or freely transfer inward or outward of its contributions, profits, capital gains, and income from assets disposal, royalty of IP rights. So yeah, the future is quite the futures for investment in China is still quite promising, and so please do consider your business on how to extend your business into China. And if you have any inquiries or questions you want to know, welcome to approach us. You can talk to us, and also we can contact our service providers in China, partner law firms in China, to provide more detailed advices on this. And so I will hand over to my colleague Xue Kun. She will share more about the appropriate legal structures when you come into China.
Thanks, Connor. Amy, I think I'll share my screen from here.
Sure.
Okay, give me a moment. Let me just get the slides up. Okay, I think my slides are up.
Yes, you can see.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we've really overrun our time, so I'll try to speed it up a little bit. I will cover the types of legal structures that you may consider if you want to venture into China. So following on from what Connor has said, it really depends on whether your intended area of business will fall within the negative list or not. So if it does fall within the negative list as a restricted area, then you will have no choice but to partner with a Chinese stakeholder in a joint venture, or we call this a 合资企业. But if your intended area of business does not fall within the negative list, or if it's an encouraged area, then you can either opt for a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, in short, call it WOFE, or in Chinese we call it 外商独资企业, or you can still opt for a joint venture. But of course, as Connor said, if your intended area of business falls inside the negative list as a prohibited area, then perhaps you may consider remodeling your business structure so that you can still proceed with investing into China. Okay, so moving on to the first scenario where we will explore more about the WOFE structure. A WOFE itself is actually currently the most common structure for foreign investments into China, and whereby 100% of the shares will be owned by a foreign investor, an individual, or an entity. Under the new foreign investment law that came into effect this year, the previous laws on the respective different legal foreign investor structures like WOFE, joint venture, these have all now been abolished. So now all the foreign investor entities are simply subject to company law, similar to all the other domestic entities. So the rules on corporate governance, voting, share transfers, and things like that, as well as requirements for setup, will be largely the same for WOFE as well as for joint venture. So we'll only go through it here under WOFE. For a business license itself, what we have done here is to try to do a comparison between the requirements required for setup for a WOFE in China, as well as for its parallel in Singapore, which is a limited liability company, because a WOFE is, strictly speaking, a limited liability company itself. So similar to Singapore, WOFEs will also require business licenses, which depends on the type of business that you wish to undertake. And what happens is that they are commonly just referred to by the type of business that they undertake. So for example, if you are in manufacturing, then you are called a manufacturing WOFE. The difference in Singapore is that because China is so big, each province or city or district, and I think Connor mentioned this as well, it will be considered a separate jurisdiction. And so your business licenses are more location specific. So depending on where you want to conduct your business operations, you will have to file for a business license with the relevant authority. And as a result of that, there may also be differences in the specific requirements for each province or city or district that you are intending to start your operations in, and these must be satisfied if you do want to operate your WOFE in such places. Another thing to take note is that if you fail to commence your business operations within 6 months of incorporating your WOFE without reasonable justification, or let's say if you have already started your business but you suspend your business operations voluntarily for a period of 6 months or so, this may then result in a revocation of your business license, which you will have to apply again if you want to continue your business. For the office address itself, likewise in Singapore, you need a local registered office address, but in Singapore, it can be either a residential address or it can be a commercial address. But in China, it cannot be a residential address, what happens is that you have to submit a lease agreement for either a commercial, industrial, or retail property. It must be a signed agreement, and you must also procure certain documents from your landlord, and these are all provided to the authorities when you want to file for setting up of a WOFE. And the type of property that will suffice would largely depend on the type of company and the type of operations that you intend for. And this office address is actually quite important because it would largely restrict the location of your business operations. As I mentioned just now, each registration authority will have its own jurisdiction. So where you select to be your initial place of operation and your registered address becomes very important, because let's say subsequently, if you want to change the place of operation to a different city or province, after maybe you've tried it out and realize that your current city is not so great for your area, you cannot just do like an application for a change of registered address. Even if you're just changing the address to another district in the same city, what you have to do is actually to do a filing with the existing authority and then with the new authority, and then you have to do a move out and a move in. Alternatively, you can also keep the original company, and then you can register a branch company in the new city, because actually the actual business address can be different from the registered address, but of course there will be quite a lot of inconveniences in that case. Okay, for capital-wise, in China previously there used to be certain formal thresholds to be met for various types of different WOFEs, for example, manufacturing, and then these would vary according to the type of WOFE that you want to set up. But now there is no longer such a formal requirement except for certain sectors such as such as banking. So this is quite similar to Singapore. But then the difference is that in reality for China, it is not quite possible or advisable to set up a WOFE with no registered capital. This is because when you apply to set up the WOFE, you actually propose certain capital levels, and these are reviewed by the authorities as part of the company's application, and they will look at the intended operations of the company and the expected operating costs, and then they will decide if the proposed registered capital levels would suffice for the said operations. And of course, there are also tax advantages if you decide to put more initial registered capital than increasing the capital subsequently. The other thing would be that you no longer need to pay for the declared capital. You don't have to pay it up all at one go from day one. This is a shift in China from the paid up capital structure to a subscribed capital regime. And now it is more similar to common law jurisdictions such as Singapore itself. The timelines for payment are more flexible now, and usually it's negotiated between the shareholders and the company, and then you basically insert these into the constitutional documents of the WOFE itself. Also, likewise in Singapore, when the company does go into liquidation, of course, this payment obligation will be accelerated. Yeah, so quite a lot of these things, you realize that there are more than what goes on the surface. So you actually do need to give it a bit more thinking. So if you have any questions, you can let us know. You can link it at service providers who do provide assistance with incorporation of companies and satisfying the different requirements. So it's much easier for you when you try to set up your WOFE itself. Okay, just to highlight some of the advantages and disadvantages, and these will be clearer when we talk about joint venture later on. Of course, the advantage is that because it's 100% owned by by yourself as a foreign investor, so you have sole control. But the downside of that is that there will be a steeper learning curve, because most of the attendees today and most of us who want to enter into China, we are entering into a completely new market, so we are quite unfamiliar with the practices, the culture, the market, and the structure of how business is done. So if you do not have a local partner, you actually have to put down more resources at the beginning in order to embark on a WOFE, and for you to navigate the different requirements for setting up a WOFE and really building a strong business from the beginning in China itself. So moving on, we'll talk about a joint venture. Of course, bear in mind that a joint venture is actually just a business arrangement between two or more parties where they pool their resources together. So even though this is a necessity for industries falling within the negative list itself, this is also an option that is open to industries that fall outside the negative list. And you can either cooperate with a Chinese stakeholder, or you can cooperate with another foreign investor, and there will also be a joint venture. But for this presentation, we'll just be focusing on joint ventures with Chinese stakeholders. Okay, so as I mentioned, it's just two or more parties pooling their resources together for a business activity. Legally speaking, it is also a limited liability company, so it's the same structure as a WOFE, it's just that the equity partnership is different. Theoretically speaking, the costs, rewards, and management are shared, but in reality, the costs may not always be shared. It really depends on your negotiations with the Chinese stakeholders. And moving on, I won't talk about the setup requirements, as those would be similar to that for WOFE. To highlight the advantages and disadvantages of a joint venture. So in contrast to what I mentioned about a WOFE, for a joint venture itself, you can already leverage on a lot of resources that your local stakeholder will bring. So this could be, existing channels for sales and distribution. It could be their experience in doing business in China, or it could be any other skills, capabilities, or tangible benefits that only a local partner can offer. And because these resources are usually put together, so potentially there could be cost savings, and if you leverage on their experience in doing business, there could also be increased efficiency in establishing and reaching your goals for your business itself. And the risks will also usually be shared, but again, a lot depends on the results of the negotiations with the Chinese partner. And the downside is that because a lot turns on your negotiations with the Chinese partner and how compatible your Chinese partner is with your own business itself and the business that you intend to set up in China. So it would involve a lot more initial costs, and this would be those that are involved in due diligence and then drafting up the right contractual documentation that will bind all parties together, and also even the initial scouting for an appropriate Chinese partner and the research that and time and effort that you have to put down for that. The other thing would be because it's co-owned, so you will also have to adjust to perhaps different working methods and management style. And these could be due to things like cultural differences, it could be personal differences, and as a result, there could be more conflict and more compromises would be required. And of course, the other thing would be your profits will be shared because the resources need to be shared. Yep. Moving on, just to highlight some of the things that we've identified as keys to the success of a joint venture if you do have a Chinese stakeholder. So the first will be sourcing for the right Chinese partner, and this is really, really important because from the advantages and disadvantages that I mentioned just now for a joint venture and also for a WOFE, you really have to look at what the Chinese partner can offer in terms of structural advantages and what resources they can bring to the venture, because if you do find a complementary Chinese partner, that could at the very beginning really just elevate your business much further and much more quickly, which is of course what everyone would desire. Okay, so after you have found the right partner, you move on to do a bit more due diligence. It's basically a process where you as the investor will analyze and evaluate the different risks involved with the investment transaction. And typically speaking, it would involve the appointment of a Chinese legal team because you would usually need to look at the rights and liabilities of the Chinese stakeholder itself under their existing contracts, and also it may involve certain financial advisors. So let me give you some examples on what sort of due diligence I am talking about. Let's say if you are going to enter into a joint venture with a Chinese stakeholder, you may want to do some due diligence on the market clout, reliability, and creditworthiness of the Chinese partner. Let's say if you want to buy the assets of a Chinese stakeholder, then you would want to target your due diligence on ensuring that the assets are not encumbered. So, and that the Chinese stakeholder has good title to the assets that you are going to buy. Let's say if you're buying the business of a Chinese stakeholder wholesale, then your due diligence would be on the organization structure of the business itself, the assets, potentially the material contracts, employment contracts, could be IP rights, taxation, environmental issues, and even the financial position of the company. Sorry. And what you want to be sure of is that whatever you are purchasing will not be laced with liabilities that you're stuck with post-investment. And to make sure that the business continues to remain operational after you have really bought into the business, then this will also involve due diligence into the validity of the different required permissions and business licenses, the local industry policies, as well as whether the business itself is currently receiving any favorable treatments. And these should all be contractually provided for in your documentation between the parties so that they will remain valid post-purchase. Okay, so the different agreements that you would sign after you have already done your due diligence, typically what we see would be a sale and purchase, or it could be, or you will have a shareholders agreement. So the sale and purchase agreement, basically, as the name suggests, it will set out conditions for the purchase and sale of the shares of the target company. If you are purchasing the assets, then it will be called an asset purchase agreement. Some of the key things for you to take note, following from what I mentioned just now, would be that firstly, you need to make sure that there are strong representations and warranties and also undertakings as to the current state of the business and also the company itself. So this will cover what I mentioned just now, that the business licenses of the company will remain valid after the purchase itself, and that the Chinese stakeholder will procure the renewal of the same as and when they expire. And then usually you would want the results of the due diligence to be encapsulated as condition precedents that are in favor of the investor. So for example, if there are certain liabilities owed by the company, then these are to be discharged prior to the completion of the sale itself. The shareholders agreement is is largely the same as what you see in Singapore companies. So it will set out the rights and obligations of the shareholders to the joint venture itself. Typical things that you see would be similar to that in Singapore. Management rights, how many directors, how many may be nominated by the different parties. Reserve matters, which is what matters will require shareholders' special resolution, such as typically we see substantial sale of assets of the company, and also anti-competition. So this would be, for example, existing shareholders, they cannot engage in any other businesses in the same industry or competing with the joint venture company in the end. And typically these agreements are drafted by Chinese counsel for the transaction, but of course you will also need to do your own due diligence and make sure that your own rights are protected. And typically they are governed by Chinese law. Okay, so my second last topic will be on corporate governance. So just to share some of the differences between the Singapore corporate governance and also the corporate governance for WOFE and the joint venture. The highest decision-making authority is shareholders, so this is similar to Singapore. The difference would be that the China structure would be a two-tier board structure, whereas in Singapore, typically you just see a board of directors. But in China, you also have this thing called board of supervisors, which I will go on in further detail later. And there's also another statutory office under the PRC law that you don't see in Singapore, which is called the legal representative, or it's called the He Fa Dai Biao. Okay, so for decision-making authority, the board of directors will be in charge of day-to-day management of the company. For China itself, the shareholders themselves actually have some management rights that are conferred, and these would be overlapping with that of the directors. So for example, shareholders are given a statutory right to decide on certain business policies and investment plans of the company, whereas in Singapore that is quite unheard of. Usually the management powers of the shareholders are quite limited, and your rights to participate in the decision of the company are usually limited to those that are very fundamental and that which affect the shareholders' own rights. Okay, moving on. For the supervisors, okay, so typically a board of supervisors will have 3 members. And for bigger companies, that is what you have to establish. But for smaller companies, you can also have 1 or 2 supervisors without the need to establish a board. Who can be a supervisor? You need not be physically in China itself. And the board of supervisors itself typically will consist of certain representatives of the shareholders and the employees. And one thing to take note is that directors or senior management cannot double head. So they may not simultaneously hold both roles of director of senior management and supervisor itself. This is because, of course, the responsibility of the board of supervisors or Singapore supervisor is to monitor and supervise the management of the company itself. So this will include the legal representative, the board of directors, and the management. And this is quite broad. So some of the more specific powers that have been laid out as the responsibilities of the supervisor would be that, you know, they can inspect the financial affairs of the company. If they find that any director or senior officer has violated any law or regulation, then they can propose a removal. They can also propose holding certain interim meetings of shareholders, put forth proposals at shareholder meetings, and they can even initiate lawsuits against directors or senior officers where it is specified for under the PRC company law. So moving on to the statutory office, which is called the legal representative. The legal representative also does not have to be physically in China, and this will either be the chairman of the board of directors, an executive director, if there is no board of directors, or the general manager itself. So the responsibility is actually to represent the company in all respects. So you act legally on behalf of the company, and legal representatives are typically held to a higher standard of care and competence than other personnel in the company itself. But the reality is that for WOFEs, typically the board of supervisors and legal representative will not be someone residing in China. And this doesn't affect the operations of the company because there is still widespread practice of using CUs amongst companies in China in their day-to-day operations. So just by the use of the CU, then they can go about their daily business. But of course, therein also lies quite a lot of risks because if let's say someone who is unauthorized uses the company's CU, then there's still a chance that he may bind the company, and therein lies the danger.
Okay, Shekun, maybe we can just, you finish the Enterprise Singapore slide first.
Okay, so for those who are keen to enter the Chinese market, there are also certain programs that are offered by Enterprise Singapore that you can consider. And these range from certain grants to funding support to loans and also premium support. In the interest of time, I'll just go through them very, very generally. The first one would be the Singapore-Shanghai Joint Innovation Core Program. So this is actually collaborated with the Science and Technology Commission of Shanghai Municipality. And it's a funding support program for research and development of innovative products and applications with the end goal of commercialization. And the target is for all technological and application areas, but they have a specific focus for biopharmaceutical and life sciences, smart cities development, and also urban solutions and sustainability. And typically this requires the setup of a project consortium of at least one Singapore company and one Shanghai company, and they must be independent from each other. The Market Readiness Assistance Grant, this is more for local SMEs looking to enter into a new target market. They can have had overseas sales in this market, but it must not have exceeded a certain value for the past 3 years, and the support will come in the form of a grant of up to 70% of eligible costs between now and 31st March 2023. The double tax deduction for internationalization, with IRAS. This is actually just a tax deduction for eligible expenses, and it offers a 200% tax deduction. And this targets expenses that were expended for international market expansion and investment development activities from now until 31st December 2025, and there's a cap of 150,000 per year. The next one is the Market Access Scheme. So this is specific also for Singapore companies wishing to venture overseas, and this is a grant program that will help you to defray some of the expansion costs, up to 80% of the qualified costs for SMEs, and they have different focus areas. So one specific focus area that they identify is M&A. So if you're hoping to invest in China through M&A, then this is something that you may consider. The multi-channel e-commerce platform program is more for companies keen to sell overseas on e-commerce. So I won't go into detail for there. The remaining 3 are actually loan schemes and premium support for political risk insurance policies. So I will also not go into detail, but of course, if you need any assistance, you can come to us. Then my last slide is actually on this particular program, which is called the Singapore Chongqing Joint Innovation Development Fund. It's similar to the Shanghai one, and this basically is for the joint development of innovative information and communications technology products, which can be commercialized in the end. So they have actually set aside about 40 million RMB, and they will have target areas such as artificial intelligence, IoT, virtual reality, robotics. So if you are looking to start a business in this area in China, then this is something that you can consider. And before I end off and let Leon chime in, I think one thing to take away from this seminar, if any, would be that, you know, it's extremely important for you to strategize from the beginning on where you want to start your business in China, because tying with what Connor said about how the different cities and provinces have different policies for promotion of different areas, right? If you can leverage on that, that can really give your new venture in China a very big boost. And if then coupled with good planning to avoid the different issues that we have raised in this seminar, your business will already fare a lot better than, you know, the millions of other businesses that are hoping to get a piece of the Chinese market. Yeah, Leon?
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I know we are sort of running out of time. So for those of you who have something on later on, then maybe you all can log off. But actually what we wanted to say is the most important thing here is to summarize. Basically, if you look at if you are incorporating an entity in China, you have to think forward about what you want to do. We have an example of a client that incorporated an e-learning business and wanted to start in Shanghai. They later on decided within Shanghai, Congmingdao was an area which offered them a virtual address, so they didn't have to pay for office space. And gave them tax incentives, so they went to register the company there. By registering in Congming, actually the cost of registration was absorbed by the Congming government. So basically, it was no cost to them. Subsequent to that, they decided that quite apart from just doing an electronic platform for e-learning, they wanted to set up shop space, retail space where people could come in and then could make use of their facilities, and they could have e-learning classes there, and they could also actually have physical teachers potentially doing classes there. Now, what they realized was that in order to set up in another area in Shanghai, for example, Jiading, they had had to rent a space. After they rented the space, they set up a branch because you can't have 2 addresses for one company. So you set up a branch in Jiading, and when you set up a branch in Jiading, you need to apply for a license. The rules in China is different from Singapore. Every company that you set up needs to have an 营业执照 or 营业牌照, which is basically your business license, and your business license will get approval from different departments depending on what industry you're in and what you are proposing to do. So what they realized was actually when they were in Jiading, they wanted to set up a physical learning center that fell within the education segment, which required approval by the various authorities in Jiading, which is a small town. But because they had set up their original company in Congmingdao, which gave them a virtual address, being a branch company, the parent company, the actual company, needed also to get the same education license, which they could not get because they did not have any physical shop there for them to go and apply for the license. So deciding on where to set up your entity, your first entity, is important because you should think about what your expansion plans are moving forward. What else do you want to be involved in? So don't just jump into the town that offers you free setup or the best tax incentives, because it is not necessarily future-proof. So in that situation, the original setup had to be unwound. In fact, they didn't have to pay money to set up the company, but they had to pay money to unwind the company and then to go and set up another entity, which allowed them to do so. Yeah, so that's one of the examples. Then the next thing about local partners, looking for local partners in China, the Chinese courts are becoming increasingly very commercial, meaning that they actually enforce non-compete non-competition clauses. So it is important when you negotiate your contract with your partners to make sure that the non-compete clauses are drafted in a way which will be looked upon favorably by the courts, and also to build in certain safeguards administratively and operationally for yourself. So for example, there's no point in saying, okay, I will sue you in court if you compete with me. But you could say, if we have evidence that you compete with me, then when you exit our partnership, I will buy back your shares for a nominal value because there is competition. If you don't compete with me, I will buy it back at market value times a PE number or PE factor or so and so. So you can incorporate operational clauses within your contracts to prevent your partners from going rogue. So that's another important thing to think about. Due diligence is very, very important. Particularly because if you look at the land law in China, we have had so many clients go in with a JV or went in and took over the business as well as the property of a Chinese company without realizing that in the past, certain types of land can be alienated, certain types of land cannot. Certain types of land, especially if they are in the further out areas that is known as community land or villages land, land use rights transfer can be very complicated. We have had companies who have been in China since 2002 and they still haven't sorted out their land law issues. And the municipal government is fighting with the township government and wanting to take back the land. So the due diligence is very important to determine what sort of title you have. Because when people tell you, I have a factory, it doesn't necessarily mean the same concept as you have in Singapore that, okay, you have a lease that has been registered, it is properly yours, you can dispose of it. You may not be able to do that. Yeah. And the final 2 points that we wanted to make, it was in relation to the Faran. The Faran is essentially your managing director sort of role, except that he's even more powerful than that. He can bind the company. So who you appoint as your Faran is very important. Your Faran is also the one that is solely responsible if anything goes wrong, which means that a lot of our clients who are outside China, who incorporate in China, they actually do not locate their Faran in China. So their Faran sits outside China, and their Faran is someone who usually does not visit China at all, because if any township authority or any municipal authority wants to find difficulty for your company, for example, your Faran, the moment he steps into China, can potentially be arrested. And given the situation, it's sometimes going to be very difficult for you to go and get access to this Faran expeditiously. Yeah. And the next point was on company seal. The company seal, unlike the Singapore company seal, which needs to be affixed in the presence of 2 directors and one director, 1 secretary, in China, the company seal, which is just a rubber stamp, which has to be registered and cannot be counterfeited. If you counterfeit it, that's against the law. But that seal alone can actually operate everything, can operate your bank accounts. So we have had clients who had set up partnerships in China with a partner, and they left the company seal with a partner. And during the dispute last year, the Chinese partner just took the seal, went to the bank and emptied all the bank accounts. And by the time they reached China, all the money was gone. So it's very important that the company seal of the company be held by someone whom you can trust. Yeah. And finally, in terms of, as a summary, if you look at the incentives that ESG is offering, if you look at the push that Singapore is trying to support, and you look at the incentives that different local governments in China are offering you, if you maneuver it correctly, this is a really good time where the cost for you to set up a presence in China is going to be very low. We go on to the Q&A segment. I think one of the Q&A segments, someone asked about Shanghai and Hangzhou. Shanghai, the difference that you need to notice is depending on your type of business. If you deal direct with consumers, for example, Shanghai has something close to 30 million people in the city itself. So if you ask us what sort of Singapore businesses are there, actually, if you look at the F&B outlets, you have Jumbo, you have Songfa, you have Mei Zhenxiang, you have Toast Box, you have Bread Talk, you have the Malaysian Secret Recipe, which ran away. They collapsed last year and they ran away. I think they owed a lot of money. But in Shanghai also, we see a lot of fintech companies. That's also where the financial center of China is, and actually a lot of businesses that start or from Shanghai, because Shanghai is a commercial center. It's more commercial than Beijing. Beijing, depending on what sort of industry you're in, depending on whether you need a relationship with state-owned enterprises, you may locate yourselves in Beijing. So I hope that sort of answers your question. There are many cities in China which is still growing. The first-tier cities, Beishang, Guangzhou, so Shenzhen and Guangzhou as well, have been expanding. But the more interesting places to look at right now with more exponential growth, especially if you're looking at the property price increase, if you're looking at the growth of that domestic economy within those cities, you should be looking at the second-tier cities. The second-tier cities are coming up. If you're looking at moving manufacturing into China, don't bother unless you're doing high tech, because China is reinventing itself. So a lot of the old towns, industrial towns that, for example, Singaporeans have been very used to, like Suzhou Industrial Park, Wuxi Industrial Park, and so on and so forth, a lot of the businesses there who do low-brow manufacturing have received notices to stop work and to either relocate outside into more rural areas, into third-tier cities, if not to exit China. And because the Chinese government can move very fast, it also means that when you get this sort of notice, you also have to react very fast, right? And one last question, which is the Q&A, which is who will be the employees of the JV to be hired under? What are the restrictions for hiring of foreign manpower? You need to apply for a work permit for your employee. If you're a shareholder and you're a business owner, it's not so difficult for you to get to get the work permit. Of course, right now, because it's COVID times, it's not so easy. Going back is also not easy because you need to quarantine, and you need the green lane is actually not moving very fast. But you should hire locals. I mean, there are locals there that you can hire, but you should also be able to bring in some Singaporeans into that city. Also, don't worry, there are actually many Singaporeans or Southeast Asians who are there who are permanent residents. So somehow they have gotten their permanent residency in China. So there are people that are available there for you to hire, and we know a lot of Singaporeans in Shanghai itself. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Leon, and the speakers, Shekun and Connor, for the very insightful sharing. And thanks, Leon, for taking the questions on the Q&A box already. So maybe I can also ask on behalf of our SGTech members, mainly the ICT folks. So I saw Mac's question regarding competitiveness. So you also mentioned that Shanghai being a financial hub, there are a lot of many companies that set up over there. So do you think there's still any space for Singapore companies to fight in? Is there still any bright spots for the Singapore companies in Shanghai, other than maybe fintech, which might be quite crowded?
Right. Actually, if you run any business, Shanghai is definitely a place for you to consider. Number one, because Shanghai is probably the most cosmopolitan of all Chinese cities. You will feel quite at home. It's not a very daunting city like Beijing, for example. Shanghai has a very big domestic market. So if you want access to consumers there, that's definitely where you should set up. There is also an e-commerce platform city being built near Jiading, where Jingdong is spearheading. Jingdong and Alibaba is spearheading, and that's something you should look at as well. We also know the people who have set it up, and you should consider if you are setting up an e-commerce platform. Depending also on what you're doing, because Shenzhen also is definitely a very interesting area. Competitive wise, I think Singaporeans, we generally, every time I go to China, I feel that I'm a bit spoiled. In terms of being Singaporean, everything is fed to me. The Chinese are actually much hungrier, so we do have to work harder lah. But it also means that if you find the correct Chinese partner whom you can incentivize with the correct incentives, they will work very hard for you as well. Just have to be careful. A lot of what we find with tech companies, whether it's Singapore tech companies or it's a Thai or a Vietnamese tech company that talk to us, a lot of them are very concerned about IP rights. But once they step into Shenzhen, they realize in their maker economy, if someone copies them, they're more proud, because you see, I'm ahead. I just need to stay ahead of the game. I don't care if people copy me, because if they copy me, it means that I have something that's worth copying. So as long as I'm ahead of the game, I will get access to market. Whereas a lot of Singaporeans, a lot of Thais and Vietnamese, and then some of the US companies that talk to us as well, the first thing they go is, how do I protect? Is this person copying part of my work? But we're like, why are you concentrating on that? China is such a huge domestic market. If you keep ahead at the game, people will come to you. So the whole IP rights concept, right, I think is a bit skewed in cities outside China. You have to be there to realize how it is moving. So if you look also at the luxury brands, the FMCG brands that do fashion, none of them are enforcing in China all the counterfeit A-货, you know, because by the time someone copies them, the new season is out already. By the time they go and sue and they go to court, that particular collection is obsolete. You know, so that's why you don't see that very often in China. Yeah.
Okay. So Clara also had a question regarding red flags of a company if they want to enter joint venture into WOFE. So you mentioned that it depends on industry. So let's say if it's a ICT company, so because SGTech mainly our members are infocom tech companies. So
I think
the things to look out for?
Okay, if you find a JV partner, and your JV partner, the very important thing to realize is that you need to do physical. I reply actually to say that you need to do physical due diligence and verification. You need to send someone down. You need to go and see their office. You need to go and talk to them. You need to see their product. You need to understand. And you also need to do a bit of market investigation, because sometimes they say that they have this product, but actually they take it from a third party. They might not have the source code to the programs that they're giving you. A lot of people go to these programmers in China, and they're cheap. They'll do an app for you. They can do an app on WeChat. They can do an app for your iOS. But the problem with it is, where's the source code? Who's going to maintain it for you? Are they going to be there for you along the way, throughout the way? Because some of them, they just take their money and they run. So you need to understand what their market reputation is. You need to actually go down there, see the other players, understand, hear about what they do. So that's the most important thing. Then also, you know, I mean, there were horror stories in the past about partners that say they have a factory, then they bring you on a tour and you see the factory, but actually 2 months later when you go back, the factory is abandoned, it's empty. It was just a show that's put up for you. So in Singaporeans shouldn't be so gullible. I mean, you really have to do your due diligence.
Okay. So are there any legal documents that can help to facilitate this due diligence process?
Yes and no. There are documents that we need to ask to see. That if you appoint lawyers to do your due diligence for you, they will ask to see their business licenses. They will ask to see the contracts. They will ask to see the cash flow. They will ask to see the financial statements, to see that it matches. But there's nothing that a lawyer can, without physically going there and doing your investigations, there's nothing a lawyer can do to prevent fraud. If the documents they send to us are fraudulently prepared, then we won't be able to tell you this is fraud, because, you know, they give us a document and they usually will give you a copy. They won't give you the original, you know. So at most you can go and we have legal recourse to them to say, hey, all this is fraudulent. But by that time you would have lost millions. Is it worth it or not? Yeah, that's the other issue lah.
Okay, thanks. So there's another question on the employment. So if they were to hire local Singaporeans and Chinese, what are the legal regulations that oversees this kind of employment issues?
Oh, I mean, it's the same as Singapore. If we want to hire a foreigner, there might be racial requirements that you need to meet. The foreigner that comes in, you obviously need to get the relevant visa, whether it's an employment pass or a work permit or an S pass, and then the employee will need to pay tax locally in Singapore as well as in China. I mean, for example, so it's not difficult to get foreigners come to be employed under your company into China. That's actually not the difficulty. And it's also not difficult to find Chinese employees as well, especially in the big cities, because everybody, all the good graduates will flock into the major cities, into the first tier cities to look for a job. Yeah.
Okay. What about sending interns over to the Singapore or JV companies in China? Are there any restrictions on interns?
Actually, there are a lot of interns that go into China from Singapore. Every year we see a lot of them from SMU and from NUS who go into China, whether it's in Shenzhen or in Shanghai or in Beijing or in Guangzhou. And there are programs that allow the interns to go there. You can also bring your intern in there. Technically, you need to 签证 for them, but a lot of them actually just go in on a visitor's pass, and then they actually go there and they shadow around. The thing about China is you shouldn't, if you get caught, that's a problem. But a lot of Chinese businessmen, they operate on the mentality that if no one raises an issue, it's okay. From a Singapore perspective, that's why I said there's a difference between Singaporeans and the Chinese. Singaporeans is, oh, this one cannot be done, we won't do it. The Chinese is, this one doesn't say it cannot be done. I haven't been told not to do it, so I will do it first, and then they will come back to me. So maybe the middle line is something more acceptable to us rather than all the way in the Chinese way of doing things. But yes, interns are in China all the time, so that's not a problem. You just need to make the necessary applications.
Hi, Leon.
Okay.
Hi, Leon. I want to add on more on this because I talked to my friends in the authorities. In relation to hire foreigners in China, first of all, your company has to be qualified to hire foreigners. But usually for the companies that invested by foreigners, like foreign invested companies, this qualification won't be a big issue. And then you will have to file or apply for the so-called 就业证, which is a working visa for the foreign employee. And unlike the Singapore, there's no quota limitation on this hiring of foreign employees. Like in Singapore, you have hire several locals in order to hire foreigners, but in China, there won't be such restrictions or quota things. Yeah.
Let me add. Thanks, Connor. Connor is our Chinese lawyer. He's actually a China lawyer that's working in Asia practice, and he works with us and helps our ASEAN country clients invest into China. He also helps our China clients come into Singapore. What Connor says is correct. There is no law relating to a quota stating explicitly. But also, if you look at the sort of company that you set up, when you apply for more and more foreign workers to come into your company, you may not get the approval. China is not as transparent as Singapore, so there's no guarantee that you get the approval. If, for example, I set up a 10,000 renminbi company to do consultancy, and I suddenly apply for 3,000 foreign workers to come into China, you are unlikely to get your approval. So that's what I meant. Huh?
I see. Okay. Yeah, there's one comment by Chin Hong. He mentioned that if you are out of Singapore for more than half a year, you actually don't need to pay tax in Singapore.
Chin Hong, yes. If you are out of Singapore, you are not tax resident in Singapore. As long as you're not tax resident in Singapore, you don't have to pay tax in Singapore. But if whatever money you earn in China and you pay tax in China, and then you repatriate it back. So I mean, I've worked in many countries before. I've worked in Japan, I've worked in China. When you come back to Singapore and you start declaring your tax in Singapore, the Singapore IRAS will send you a letter to say, oh, we notice you're back now. So how much money did you bring back from this country, from Japan? Then you have to declare to them. And once you declare to them, they will apply the double taxation rules that Singapore has a DTA with China. So they will apply the double taxation rules. And if there's any excess tax, they will ask you to pay. So yes, so what you're saying is right and it's wrong. Lah. I mean both. Lah. The taxman will always want his share. Lah.
He also mentioned about medical certificates being issued by local hospitals required for work permit application.
Medical certificates?
I guess it's in relation to the work permit regulation.
Yes. That's correct.
Okay. So I have a question on my own. So for Singapore companies, if they were to earn profits from China, right? Is there any issues with regards to profits repatriation?
Yes.
Besides the taxman chasing you for taxes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes and no. One, you need to pay your taxes first in China. So there is the value-added tax, and then there's the corporate tax. And then once it's been paid, you will need to go to your bank, and you need to tell your bank you want to repatriate the money. In the past, it used to be very difficult. Right now, after the rules change and the operational practices have changed, right now you can. But the problem with the 外汇 is basically there's a limit every day on each bank on how much money, how much RMB they can convert to US dollar to repatriate out. They won't repatriate RMB, they will have to convert it into a foreign currency and then repatriate it out. And there's a limit. So your bank might say to you, oh, you made $20 million, but I cannot remit all $20 million after you've paid tax. I can't remit all $20 million to you today. It may take the cost of a week or 2 weeks because, you know, our limits need to be open for everybody else. Yeah. So repatriation right now is not that big an issue. But if you look at tax planning, the local Chinese tax, depending on what sort of subsidiary you set up, there are different tax tiers for different sizes of companies. So you may be better off setting up 5 small subsidiaries that fall under the small businesses segment that pays less tax or sometimes even is tax exempt, than if you set up one big company where your combined revenue is so high that you actually pay a lot more tax. So that's where, you know, when you want to plan your entry into China, it is important for you to think about what you want to do, what you want to achieve, and future-proof your structure.
Okay, thanks for the very insightful sharing. So I think we have massively overrun today.
I'm so sorry.
No worries. So I think it's a very good discussion. So if the audience, you have any further questions, you may stay on for a little bit. But for the rest of the people who would like to drop out, you may. Maybe I can also share some upcoming events for our SGTech audience members. So we do have one session on with Israel companies on the 8th September and one with the Latin America market on the 18th September. So if you're interested in these markets, please you can sign up through the links over here, and also the links can be found in the chat function. And especially for Latin America, I would like to highlight that it's actually an early morning webinar because of the time difference we have with the market. So we have chosen us to be in the morning and them to be at night. So if you would like to join us for this session, it's 8 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. Then if you would like to join our Chinese business matching sessions, please just drop us an email, or you can provide your information through the Google form. And lastly, we have an internationalization survey. So SGTech would like to collate market interest. So if you would like to provide your plans for internationalization, please provide through the link over here. And thank you all once again for joining us today. So I will leave this session open in case there are further questions for our speakers. And we'll see you on 8th September again for the Israel webinar. Thank you.